The metallic sound of the key hitting the iron lock still echoes in my memory. It was the same key I had carried in my pocket for decades, hanging from a worn keychain with the initials of my late husband. But that night, when I tried to turn it in the door of my house in Tybee Island, I met resistance. The key wouldn't move, as if the very heart of the house had shut itself against me. The ocean wind blew hard, carrying the salty scent of the waves. I gripped the handle tight, the cold seeping into hands marked by years of labor. My legs trembled, not from age, but from a strange intuition. Something was wrong. I took a deep breath, trying to swallow the knot rising in my throat. That's when I heard footsteps behind the door, hurried, muffled, as if someone were hiding. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice cracked with surprise. At first, only a heavy silence. Then a man's dry voice cut through the wood. "This property is protected by the bank. You can't come in." My knees almost gave way. "What do you mean? I can't come in? I was the one who built those walls, brick by brick, paid for with the lunches I sold, with the extra shifts I worked in the school kitchen. Every cent had been earned with sweat. Every corner of that house held laughter, tears, and prayers. Indignation burned in my chest. How could anyone do this to me? I thought. But I still had no idea what was waiting for me. I leaned my forehead against the door, trying to understand. The smell of fresh paint seeped through the cracks. Someone had been inside. A sharp pain hit my stomach, as if my very history was being repainted without my permission. I grabbed the handle again, harder this time, almost desperate. On the other side, the same voice repeated, "Please, leave. You have no rights here anymore. Rights." The word cut deep. How many times had I given up my own rights for the sake of family? How many times had I stayed silent not to hurt, not to divide? The respect I gave, had it never been worth anything? As I stepped back, one detail stabbed me like a knife. Through the side window, half covered by a curtain, I recognized the shadow of someone I knew too well. A woman with long hair, her silhouette outlined against the yellow light of the living room. My heart raced. Brianna, my daughter-in-law. My mind spun with questions. Why was she inside? Why were they changing the locks of my house? And why was the bank involved in all of this? The pain came in waves. It wasn't just the feeling of losing bricks, wood, and roof. It was my dignity being stripped before my eyes. I felt as if God wasn't trying to break me, but to make me see what I hadn't wanted to. That the danger was coming from my own blood. My knees buckled. I held onto the railing, looked up at the dark sky, and whispered, "Lord, give me strength. Don't let me be alone now." The lights in the house suddenly went out. Total silence. The only sound was the crashing waves, indifferent to my pain. A strange mix of abandonment and courage began to rise inside me. I knew I had to uncover the truth, but I also knew it might shatter me. Dear reader, if your dignity has ever been wounded by the very person you trusted most, let your heart speak in the comments. Your words may be the embrace another woman needs today. As I stepped away from the porch, with the smell of salt clinging to my hair, my phone buzzed. A notification flashed across the screen. A withdrawal authorized in my name that very afternoon. The ground seemed to vanish beneath my feet. Who had meddled not only with my house, but with my money too? And then, with my heart pounding, I heard a muffled whisper from inside the house. I couldn't catch every word, but one phrase pierced through the wall like a blade. "She'll never find out how we pulled this off." I clutched the phone to my chest, leaning on my faith to hold me up. But what I heard next shook me to the core. The phone was still vibrating in my hand when I got back to the car. The sea roared behind me, but what deafened me were those words, She'll never find out. I opened the banking app with trembling fingers. The screen lit up my face, and for a moment, I saw my wrinkles like rivers. 3 large withdrawals, all authorized, and 1 cold entry, mortgage release, final review. My name on it, as if I had requested it myself. I spent the night on my feet, leaning against the window. My prayer was stripped of poetry. God, I need solid ground. At dawn, I took the first bus to Charleston. I arrived early, wearing the blue coat I'd once worn to my husband's funeral. The branch smelled of stale coffee and recycled air. Behind the counter stood a woman with her hair pulled into a tight bun and sharp, attentive eyes. "I'm Marisol Bennett. How can I help you?" she asked. I showed her the screen, the withdrawals, the mortgage release. Her brow furrowed, and she asked me to wait. Sweat ran down my neck. My mind kept repeating, how can a mother discover she's raised a stranger? Marisol led me into a glass office and lowered her voice. "There's a power of attorney on file. It grants broad authority to manage your assets and handle the Tybee property." The air thinned. "Power of attorney." My voice came out in a whisper. She turned the screen toward me. My signature, or an attempt at it, glared back at me from a form I had never seen. Below it, 2 names, Brianna Lowe Carter listed as agent, and, on the witness line, someone whose name froze my hands. My stomach turned to salt and steel. "That's not mine." Marisol drew in a deep breath. "I believe you. I can put a temporary hold on the release, but I'll need to open a protocol. Do you have a copy?" I shook my head. "Then we'll request one." As she typed, I could see caution and indignation wrestling on her face. That gave me hope. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Mom, stop being dramatic. We're just organizing your assets. Trust us." I almost replied, but slipped the phone back into my bag. Words, at that moment, were matches near gasoline. I chose to breathe instead. Dignity, too, can be chosen silence. Marisol printed documents and copied my ID. "I'll freeze the transactions for 72 hours. If anyone pressures you, call me." She scribbled her number on a slip of paper, then hesitated. "And one more thing. The house appraisal was requested by Elliot Price." The name slammed against me like a door in the wind. "Do you know him?" I shook my head. "He usually comes accompanied." She paused. "Sometimes with leaders." So the pastor had stepped right into my finances. The image of him clasping my hand in the church hallway. "God bless you, Sister Miriam," burned like acid. What kind of blessing carries a forged signature? Anger surged, but I held it back. Anger without direction only breaks the one who carries it. In the glass reflection, I saw myself, tired eyes, but not empty. I touched my hands, the same hands that stirred pots to raise a son. My freedom is not negotiable, I thought, and the phrase carved itself inside me. When I left, the sun felt more blinding than warm. I called Ruthie Mae Johnson, my neighbor in faith. "Ruthie," they changed the lock and touched my money. On the other end, silence, then steady breathing. "I'm making coffee. Come over. If stories like mine matter to you, leave a heart." Sometimes the smallest gesture says, "You're not alone." On the way to her house, a billboard caught my eye. "Plan your future today." I gave a bitter smile. My future was being planned by other hands, and still, something stirred inside me, a thread of courage, hope fit inside a single breath of air. Ruthie welcomed me on her porch with an embrace that gave my body weight again. "Sit down." The simple table, the floral cloth, 2 steaming mugs. I told her everything, piece by piece, no embellishment. She listened without interrupting, eyes wet but steady. When I finished, she slipped away to her bedroom and returned with an envelope. "You'll need to see this." My skin prickled. "What is it?" She set the envelope on the table without opening it, proof of who talks and who acts. Just then, the phone rang. The name on the screen made me tremble. It flashed like fire. Brianna. My palms sweated. I didn't answer. I let the phone buzz on Ruthie's floral tablecloth until silence filled the room. The envelope sat between us, heavy as stone. Ruthie sighed softly. "Open it when you're ready." I slipped it into my bag, as if carrying dynamite. The smell of fresh coffee tried to soothe me, but indignation burned hotter than bitterness. I drew a deep breath. Sunday had come, and with it, the church service. I decided to go, not just to pray, but to look into the eyes of those who smiled while my life was being stolen beneath the table. The sanctuary was full. Wooden pews, voices in chorus, the organ carrying the hymn. I walked to my usual spot, aware of eyes following me, some with affection, some with curiosity, and a few with judgment. Ruthie stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm, whispering without words, "You're not alone." When Pastor Glenn stepped up to the pulpit, my heart jolted. He preached about trust, about family as the foundation. Each word felt like a blade disguised as a blessing. I looked at Brianna, seated in the front row with Daniel and the children. She smiled with rehearsed serenity, playing the perfect wife, the dutiful daughter-in-law. After the hymn, the pastor opened the floor for testimonies. Before I could move, Brianna rose. Her pale dress swayed with calculated grace. She took the microphone and said in her sweetest voice, "Brothers and sisters, I ask for prayers for my mother-in-law. She's been confused, overwhelmed, and sometimes doesn't understand that we only want the best for her." The words struck like knives. Confused. Such a small word, but heavy enough to erase a lifetime of clarity. My face burned, as though every pew had turned against me. Daniel lowered his gaze. The children, oblivious, played with a coloring book. I wanted to rise, to shout, to deny it all. But something inside urged me to be still. God whispered in my chest, "Wait. Truth doesn't need to run. It only needs to stand." Still, my dignity was being dragged across the floor. Then I felt a quick touch on my arm. Ruthie, eyes steady, slipped a small flash drive into my closed hand. Her lips barely moved as she whispered, "Here's what you need to see." I gripped that tiny object as if holding my whole future. Its invisible weight made me tremble. I looked at Brianna again, now laughing with the pastor, as though she owned the narrative. And one thought cut through me like lightning. How many times had my voice already been stolen without me even knowing? At the end of the service, a few sisters hugged me, while others looked away. The hallway was full of whispers, but no one said aloud what they were thinking. I walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. A knot of loneliness pressed inside me, and yet, at the same time, a spark of strength. On the way out, Daniel came up, his face tense. "Mom, don't make a scene. Let us handle it." The word handle sounded like a sentence. Respect isn't born out of imposition. Respect grows from truth. Dear reader, if you've ever been silenced by someone who claimed they were taking care of you, write, "Respect is my right" in the comments. Your words could free another woman today. I pulled away from them, slipped the flash drive into my pocket, and walked toward the heavy wooden doors. The sunlight blinded me for an instant, but not as much as the thought exploding inside. If what Ruthie had given me was real evidence, then Brianna's lie wasn't just exposed, it was recorded. But what I discovered that night, when I plugged the flash drive into my old computer, left me shaken to the core. The room was silent as I inserted the drive. The screen flickered before opening a single folder labeled simply Truth, MP4. My fingers trembled on the mouse. I took a deep breath, like someone bracing for surgery without anesthesia. I clicked. The video began with the shaky image of a phone camera hidden between books. The crooked angle showed only a dark wooden table with 2 steaming cups. The voices, though, left no doubt. I recognized first Brianna's laugh, that soft, practiced laugh she had used so many times to win trust. "We need her to sign quickly," she said, the sweetness evaporating into coldness. "Every day that passes, the appraisal loses value." "Elliot, you made sure the bank is aligned?" A second voice, male, replied with rehearsed calm. "It's all set. But without her signature, there's no way to register the mortgage. If she resists, we've got a problem." The name thundered through the room. Elliot Price. My heart raced. My throat tightened as if I were swallowing stones. The 2 people I never imagined side by side were conspiring about my house, my sweat, my entire life. The camera wobbled slightly. That's when I realized someone had been filming them secretly. Later, I'd learn it was Deacon Earl, the timid deacon who always helped hand out hymnals. In that moment, though, I could only focus on the poison dripping from every word. "Daniel won't be able to keep his mother quiet much longer," Brianna said, stirring her cup absent-mindedly. "She's stubborn, always has been. If she figures out we're tampering with the house, she'll ruin us." The silence that followed was cut by Elliot's dry response. "Then we can't give her a choice." My legs shook. I gripped the chair so hard my nails nearly left marks. The courage to record this impressed me, but the cruelty of their conversation cut like a knife. With every word, a memory surfaced. The lunch I cooked for Brianna, the first time she entered my home as Daniel's fiancée, the toys I bought for my grandchildren while she smiled her thanks, Pastor Glenn calling her a model wife. All of it crumbled before my eyes. My mind burned with questions. How many times had they used my name without me realizing? Who else was involved? And just how far were they willing to go? The video ended abruptly, the dark screen reflecting my own face. I saw something new in it, not just pain, but a calm, sacred kind of anger. It felt as if God Himself had placed before me the missing key. The words rose up clear, like a psalm. "If truth has legs, today it ran straight to me." I closed my eyes and let a prayer escape. "Lord, thank you for revealing what was hidden. Now, give me the courage not to step back." Dear reader, if you too have discovered something that forever changed your trust, share your strength in the comments. Your words may be the breath of hope another woman needs. I took the flash drive back, wrapped it in a handkerchief as if it were a relic. I knew that small object had the power to dismantle the lie, but I also knew that with it in my hands, I had become a target. And at that exact moment, the doorbell rang, and the voice on the other side froze me in place. The ringing still echoed in my mind when I shut down the computer. My racing heart pushed me toward panic, but Ruthie's steady hands on mine pulled me back to the ground. She had arrived quietly, as if she sensed the moment to appear. We sat side by side in the dimly lit room, the flash drive resting on the table, small yet powerful, as if it could explode at any second. Ruthie took a deep breath and looked at me with the calm of someone who had already crossed many seas. "Miriam, if we let anger consume us, we lose the war before we even fight. Let's pray." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my own breath. The silence was dense, until her voice broke through, low and firm. "Lord, you are justice when the earth fails. Give my sister Miriam the courage to remain standing. Don't let lies erase the truth, or betrayal steal the dignity you yourself have given her. The tears came without warning. I didn't cry like a victim, but like someone who had finally found a shoulder to lean on. When it was my turn, my voice came out hoarse, but true. God did not spare me from the storm. He placed solid ground beneath the water, and I will walk on that ground. The phrase rose from deep inside me, as if it carried the voices of the women before me, my grandmothers who endured slavery and poverty, my mother's hands that never let go of the Bible even on the darkest days. It was faith, but not escape. Faith as an anchor. Ruthie squeezed my hand. That's it. This isn't the time to shout. It's the time to act. I stayed quiet, letting the strength of that choice settle. I didn't need to raise my voice to reclaim what was mine. I needed strategy, calm, and truth. Dignity is not defended with desperation, but with firmness. My mind began to clear. I thought of Marisol's words at the bank, of Elliot's coldness in the video, of Brianna's performance at church. All the pieces were there. What remained was to put them together. I stood slowly. The wooden floor creaked beneath my feet, but inside me, the sound was different, the beat of a heart that, though wounded, still pulsed with purpose. I picked up pen and paper, sat back down, and wrote the first line of my new life: I will no longer be silenced. Ruthie smiled. That's the first step. Dear reader, if this prayer also speaks to your heart, write, "Faith is my anchor," in the comments. Let's spread hope together. As I jotted down names, dates, and details, I felt fear shrinking. It didn't disappear, but it shrank in the face of the light rising within me. I was not alone. That same night, I made my decision. I would seek legal help. I needed someone who could turn evidence into defense, tears into arguments. This was no longer just about me. It was about every woman whose voice had ever been stolen. And when my pen stopped, a thought arrived like an announcement. Tomorrow, at 9, I would meet someone who would change the course of this battle. But the first person to appear at my door was not who I expected. The sun had barely risen when I knocked on the door of the gray legal aid building. The faded letters above the entrance did not inspire confidence. But something inside me said that behind those walls, I would find more than bureaucracy. I would find defense. The narrow hallway smelled of old paper and stale coffee. I was about to turn back when a clear, steady voice called my name. Are you Mrs. Miriam Carter? I looked up and met Camille Brooks. Her curly hair was pulled into a practical bun. Thin-rimmed glasses framed her eyes, and she carried herself with the mixture of weariness and determination of someone who had fought many battles and refused to retreat. I answered, trying to hide the tremor in my hands. She extended her warm palm toward mine. Come, let's talk. Her office was simple, a desk piled with folders, a shelf crowded with law books, and a window letting in the timid light of morning. I sat on the hard chair and felt the weight of my whole body. I told her everything: the changed lock, the bleeding bank statements, the hidden video on the flash drive. Camille didn't interrupt. She only scribbled quick notes, her eyes shifting between me and the papers. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. You have more evidence than you realize. And let me tell you this, they never expected you to come here. A spark lit inside me. What can we do? Camille laid out each step like drawing a battle map. 1. Freeze all bank transactions immediately. 2. Legally contest the power of attorney based on the forged signature. 3. Formally notify the bank, forcing them to suspend any mortgage release. 4. Call in APS, Adult Protective Services, to open an investigation into family financial abuse. Each word was like a brick being reset into the wall of my dignity. I felt my spine straighten. Finally, Camille added, and we need to keep that flash drive somewhere safe. It's the centerpiece. I handed her the object wrapped in a handkerchief, and for the first time in days, I felt I wasn't carrying the weight alone. She looked me straight in the eye. You are stronger than you think, but you must be ready. Once we start, your family will fight back. They'll try to blame you, to make you look ungrateful or confused. Don't let it shake you. Truth speaks for itself. Her words fell on me like both blessing and warning. I nodded, breathing deep. I will not step back. Dear reader, if you believe dignity is a right that cannot be negotiated, write, "I remain standing," in the comments. Together, we'll remind each other of our strength. Camille stood, picked up the phone, and began calling her contacts at the bank. Her voice changed instantly, professional, sharp, unshakable. I watched as if a fortress were rising before a storm. For the first time since the lock refused to turn, I felt there was a future. That was when my phone vibrated. The screen lit up with the name that still wounded me, Daniel. I took a deep breath before opening the message. "Mom, why are you shaming us?" The ground seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Daniel's message still burned on the screen, but before I could reply, memory pulled me back to another time. I closed my eyes and was carried to that cramped kitchen years ago, where the smell of seasoning and hot oil was the perfume of my days. I would wake at 4 a.m, while it was still dark, to prepare the lunch boxes that kept my dream alive. Huge pots bubbled at once. Fluffy rice, beans seasoned with garlic and bay leaves, chicken roasted with lemon. The lids lined up across the counter like tiny safes filled with hope. Each meal was wrapped not only with food, but with faith. The streets of Charleston knew my footsteps. Door to door, I delivered those meals to bricklayers, teachers, bus drivers. Every dollar I earned was tucked into a blue envelope hidden inside my mother's Bible, the same Bible I carry to this day. It wasn't just money. It was the invisible foundation of the house that would one day rise by the sea. My husband, James, would be waiting for me in the late afternoon, apron still tied at his waist. He would laugh at my exhaustion and say, "Miriam, you're not just selling food, you're selling care." The years went on like that, until the day we visited Tybee Island for the first time. The scent of salt in the air, the soft wind, the constant sound of the waves. I looked at that stretch of land and knew that would be our refuge. We sold the old car, gathered the blue envelopes, and put a down payment on the little wooden house with the narrow porch. I cried at the signing, not for the papers, but for everything they represented. Not long after, sickness came and took James. The same man who had held my hands in that kitchen was gone, leaving behind a cold bed and an absence that nearly shattered me. But the house remained. I no longer had his embrace, but I had the walls that kept his laughter. I remember that first winter alone. The wind slammed against the windows while I curled up on the couch beneath a blanket, asking God if there was still meaning in going on. It was there, between sobs, that I promised myself that house would never be abandoned. It would be the testimony of our labor, the inheritance that would carry generations. Every birthday of the grandchildren, every prayer whispered on my knees on that porch, every meal shared with neighbors on stormy days reaffirmed that pact. The house was more than a roof. It was an altar, a diary, a tomb, and a rebirth. And now, to know they were trying to rip it away from me felt as though they wanted to erase my entire history. That's why, when I thought of the changed lock, the tears came hot, not from weakness, but from certainty that no one could steal what had been built with love. I touched the memory of that living room floor, remembering when we laid the simple tiles. James had teased me that they were crooked, and I replied, "But they're solid." I had mixed that cement with my own hands, marking every corner with sweat, and the truth rose like a prayer inside me. Every tile in that floor has my name written on it. Dear reader, if you too have fought for something that seemed impossible and won through faith, write "My sweat has value" in the comments. Together, we remind ourselves and one another that nothing is in vain. I opened my eyes and returned to the present. The phone was still in my hands, Daniel's message glowing like hot iron. I sighed deeply. The pain of the past reminded me of who I was. And that is why his betrayal now cut even deeper. And just then, I heard a noise outside the window, like careful footsteps, watching. The steps faded, followed by a soft knock at the back door. My heart raced, but I knew the sound before I opened it. Daniel. He walked in without asking, as always, bringing with him an invisible weight that filled the room more than his presence. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot from sleeplessness or shame. "Mom, why are you doing this to us?" he blurted, not even sitting down. "You're turning our lives into a circus. Everyone at church is talking. You always have to be in control of everything." The word hung in the air. Control. I drew a deep breath, fighting the urge to lash out. "Control?" I asked, my voice calmer than the storm inside. "Is that what you call defending what is mine?" He ran his hand through his hair, restless. "You never trust me. You always think I'll fail. I just want to help, but you treat me like I'm still a boy." The pain that slid through my chest wasn't only from a betrayed mother. It was the echo of something bigger. In that instant, I saw the same distressed look my father wore when he depended on others to survive. I saw my mother exhausted, carrying burdens that weren't hers. I saw entire generations fighting against the current of dependence. Daniel couldn't see it, but he was repeating the cycle. The anger he directed at me was, in truth, anger at himself for not being able to break free. And the guilt he tried to shove down my throat was the cloak he had learned to wear to hide his own fragility. I stood. My hands trembled, but my voice came out steady. "Son, support is one thing. Handing over my life on a silver platter is another. I gave you my work, my sweat, my prayers, but dignity isn't an inheritance passed on carelessly." He looked away, muttering, "You're cold, Mom. You don't feel anything." The words cut deep, but they didn't bring me down. I straightened my shoulders and said, "You've mistaken boundaries for coldness, and I will no longer carry a guilt that isn't mine." The words landed heavy, yet freeing. Daniel stared at me for a moment, as if he no longer recognized the woman before him. Then he turned and left, slamming the door, leaving behind a silence that hurt, but also illuminated. Dear reader, if you've ever had to set boundaries with someone you love and were called cold, write "My boundary is love" in the comments. Your words could be balm for another woman today. I stayed alone in the room, embraced by the echo of my own sentences. For the first time, I realized that love also meant knowing when to say no. And that no was the only chance to break the cycle that had haunted generations. But as I breathed in this new courage, the landline began to ring, and the name I heard on the other end chilled me. The phone kept ringing as I picked it up, trying to disguise the tremor in my voice. On the other end, Camille's tone was grave. "Miriam, I need you to come to my office now." Minutes later, I was sitting across from her, eyes fixed on a pile of documents freshly arrived from the notary. Camille slipped off her glasses and rubbed her forehead before speaking. "I found something that could turn the case, but it also shows how far they're willing to go." She slid a copy of the power of attorney across the desk. The paper gleamed under the yellow lamp, as if daring me to read. I scanned each line, my chest tightening until I reached the moral witness field. There, in firm letters, was the name I least wanted to see: Pastor Glenn Whitaker. The air vanished. The same man who preached about faith, trust, and family had signed his name to legitimize the lie. Part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake, but Camille was direct. This isn't standard practice. The figure of a moral witness has no legal weight. It's a cheap invention, used to create an appearance of legitimacy. In truth, it only proves conspiracy. My hands gripped the arm of the chair until they hurt. The pastor, the one who held my face in the mornings of mourning, was now complicit in the theft of my dignity. And the worst part, Camille continued, is that this signature is the loophole we need. If we contest it, the entire document can be thrown out. My eyes filled with tears, not of weakness, but of indignation. God was showing me that lies, no matter how dressed in holiness, always leave a trace. That was when the office door opened. Officer Elena Martinez stepped in, uniform impeccable, eyes alert. She shook Camille's hand firmly before turning to me. "We received a tip about suspicious activity at your Tybee property. Looks like Elliot Price scheduled a secret appraisal for tomorrow morning." The news hit like thunder. The scheme pressed forward. Even with the transactions frozen, they wanted, at any cost, to turn my house into currency. Camille leaned across the desk. "We need to be there, with evidence and with authority." Officer Martinez nodded. "I can accompany and record everything. If they try anything, it'll be a clear violation." I looked at the two women before me, one of the law, the other of justice, and felt I was no longer alone. Fear still lingered, but it no longer ruled me. Dear reader, if you believe truth and courage walk hand in hand, write "Lies can't survive the light" in the comments. Camille gathered the papers. Martinez adjusted the holster on her belt, and I took a deep breath. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing to fight back. And that night, lying awake in bed, only one question echoed in my mind. What would happen when the doorbell rang the next morning? The kitchen clock read 9:12 when the bell finally rang. The sound was so sharp it cut straight through my chest. My eyes swept the room. Camille was already there, her folders stacked neatly on the table, and Officer Martinez stood near the door, uniform flawless, expression resolute. I rose slowly, as if stepping into a duel. I opened the door. On the porch stood Elliot Price and a younger man carrying a leather briefcase, his curious eyes scanning the house. Elliot wore a polite, rehearsed smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter. We've come for the property inspection." My heart raced. I drew a deep breath before answering, but Martinez stepped forward. She lifted a blue folder and opened it in front of them. Official order. All transactions involving this property are suspended for 72 hours. And from this moment on, any attempt at appraisal will be recorded as part of a forgery investigation. Elliot's smile froze. He tried to hold his composure, but the broker beside him lowered his eyes. Uneasy, Elliot cleared his throat. "There must be some mistake. We have a signed power of attorney." Camille rose and walked to the door, placing a copy of that very document in front of him. Mistake indeed. Contested signature, invalid witness, and signs of coercion. Do you still want to insist? His face changed. He was no longer the polite professional. His brows furrowed, lips pressed thin, and for a second I saw the real man behind the mask. Cold, threatened, unable to hide his fury. "You're making things worse for yourself, Mrs. Carter," he said, voice low, almost a venomous whisper. A chill ran down my spine, but this time I didn't step back. I looked straight into his eyes. "No, Mr. Price, I'm setting myself free." Officer Martinez jotted down notes quickly, recording every word. The young broker grew more uneasy until he stepped back. "I didn't know there was an investigation," he muttered, retreating off the porch. Elliot tried to follow, but Martinez raised her hand. "You are hereby officially notified. The investigation is underway. I recommend you cooperate." He gave me one last look, a mix of rage and defeat. The mask had fallen. The respectable man now looked like nothing more than a cornered gambler, caught in the act. Dear reader, if you've ever seen someone's mask fall before the light of truth, write "Light reveals everything" in the comments. Your story might give strength to another woman today. The sound of the doorbell still echoed in my mind as I closed the door behind them. My knees trembled, but my heart beat strong with courage. For the first time, I felt the tide begin to turn in my favor. But I didn't know that, in church the following Sunday, The public shame would be heavier than any doorbell rung. Sunday came with the weight of a silent trial. I walked to church in a simple navy dress, the same one I had worn at James's funeral. The doors were open, the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers wrapping around me like memory. But as I stepped inside, I felt the stares, some with compassion, some with doubt, and a few, the hardest to bear, with judgment. The service carried on as usual, hymns, psalms, the choir singing Amazing Grace. I tried to sing, but my voice faltered. It wasn't sadness, it was the weight of carrying on my back a truth too many chose to ignore. When Pastor Glenn asked for testimonies, I stood. My heart raced, but my legs carried me firmly to the pulpit. The microphone felt heavy, but not as heavy as the silence that fell across the pews. I drew in a deep breath and let the words flow, without shouting, without bitterness. Brothers and sisters, for years I have trusted this community. Here I have wept. Here I have laughed. Here I have lifted my hands to God. But my dignity has been questioned, my voice silenced, and my name used on documents I never signed. A murmur rippled through the sanctuary. I pressed on, meeting the eyes that stared at me. I did not come here to humiliate anyone. I came to say, before God and all of you, that my dignity does not fit in anyone's pocket. The phrase echoed like contained thunder. Some heads lifted in agreement, others bowed in discomfort. Even the pastor shifted, his rehearsed smile twitching at the corners. Then a figure rose from the back. Deacon Earl. His trembling hands held up a phone. I recorded it because I was afraid, he confessed, his voice breaking. Afraid I'd be complicit if I stayed silent. Everyone needs to know. I saw and heard when they plotted to deceive Sister Miriam. The whole sanctuary seemed to lean forward, the roof breathing with the congregation. Some gasped in shock, others murmured excuses. The split was clear, half defended, half doubted. I looked at Earl with silent gratitude. He had given back what I thought I had lost, proof that I wasn't crazy, nor alone. Dear reader, if you've ever had to raise your voice in a place where they tried to silence you, write, "My voice has worth" in the comments. Together we'll remind each other that imposed silence is never peace, it is prison. I stepped down from the pulpit without haste, but with firm feet. I asked for no applause, no forgiveness. I asked only for respect. The church, which had so often cradled me, was now the stage of a fracture no one could deny. And as I walked down the center aisle, feeling the weight of eyes on my shoulders, I heard a cold voice whisper behind me, "This isn't over." In that moment, I realized the pulpit had shaken, but the real earthquake was still to come. 2 days after the service, Camille called me to her office. I found her surrounded by piles of papers, her brow furrowed as if she had spent the whole night chasing hidden truths. "Miriam, the hole is deeper than we thought." She pushed a folder toward me. I opened it. What I saw wasn't just numbers, it was the X-ray of my own son's secret life. Bank statements marked in red showed sports bets on illegal sites, large amounts, repeated. Every bill I had paid with my sweat was now a lost wager on basketball games he didn't even watch. My throat went dry. Daniel, my boy. Camille looked at me with the steadiness of someone who knows truth hurts, but heals. He's sunk, Miriam. And when the money ran out, they looked for the easy way out. I turned another page and saw Brianna's electronic signature, an entire charge. Advanced coaching course for women of impact, $7,200. Paid with the card linked to my account. My stomach turned to bitter salt. I, who had spent years counting coins to buy every brick of the house, was now the unwilling financier of my daughter-in-law's ambitions. I slammed the folder shut, tears burning my eyes. I felt God's presence like hands steadying me so I wouldn't collapse. Lord, don't let me fall apart now. I need courage. Camille drew in a deep breath. This isn't just financial abuse, it's a crime, but it's also evidence. Combined with Earl's video, we've got a strong case. Dear reader, if you've ever uncovered painful secrets inside your own home, write, "The truth sets you free, even when it hurts," in the comments. Let's remind each other that no lie can survive the light. Suddenly, Camille's phone buzzed on the desk. She answered, her frown deepening. "What?" "Say that again," slowly. She scribbled notes quickly, hung up, and looked at me with grave eyes. The bank just logged an emergency attempt to release the mortgage, even with the freeze in place. That means someone inside is being pressured, or paid. The air seemed to vanish from the room. My heart pounded like a war drum. "So it's not over?" Camille shook her head. "No, Miriam. They're trying to override everything." And before I could ask who would dare such audacity, an email landed in her inbox with a blunt subject line: "Urgent release, internal priority." In that instant, I understood. The battle I thought was under control was about to explode from inside the very bank itself. That night felt endless. The room was dark, but my eyes stayed open, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers that wouldn't come. The pillow, once my companion in rest, was a stone beneath my head. I tossed from side to side, but sleep never came. I rose slowly, turned on the dim kitchen light, and made coffee. The black liquid dripped into the cup, but the taste was cold on the first sip. Still, I drank. It wasn't for pleasure, it was survival. The silence of the night was broken only by the ticking clock and the pounding of my heart. I opened the Bible on the table, its worn pages nearly falling loose. My eyes landed on the Psalms. I read aloud in a whisper, as if not to wake the ghosts. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The words didn't banish fear, but they gave it shape, made it bearable. The fear was still there, sitting across from me, but now I had a way to face it without collapsing. I picked up pen and paper, made a short, plain list, like packing a bag to cross the desert. 1. Confirm with Camille the bank protocol. 2. Speak with Officer Martinez about police protection. 3. Store copies of the evidence in a safe place. 4. Visit the Tybee house, even just from outside, to remind myself why I am fighting. I looked at the list and realized it was short, but it was solid ground. Faith wasn't escaping into the invisible. It was building step by step in the middle of chaos. Tears rolled down my cheeks, silent. I didn't cry loud, didn't give in to despair. I just let the water wash the dust from my soul. Between sobs, I thought. I cried, but I did not come undone. Dear reader, if you've ever faced a sleepless night and still found strength to rise the next day, write, "I'm still standing," in the comments. Your words could give comfort to another weary woman tonight. I closed the Bible, turned off the light, and went back to bed. The pillow was still hard, but my heart was a little firmer. I fell asleep just before dawn, the folded list resting by the lamp like a silent promise. And when I woke, with the sun streaming through the cracks of the curtain, the phone was ringing nonstop. On the other end, Marisol had discovered something that would change everything. The phone was still ringing when I answered. Marisol's voice was firmer than ever. "Miriam, I need you to come to the bank. There are things you need to see with your own eyes." I rushed to the branch. She greeted me without her usual smile, only with the seriousness of someone carrying a heavy burden. She led me into a private room, locked the door, and set a thick folder on the table. I shouldn't even be showing you this, but I can't pretend I don't know anymore. I opened the folder. A chain of emails stretched before me like a corridor of shadows. Bank employees exchanging messages about speeding up the mortgage process and fulfilling Pastor Glenn's special request. At the bottom of several, one name appeared as preferred recipient, Elliot Price. My heart hurt, but my eyes stayed steady. Marisol went on. "There's an internal employee who facilitated every step. He received outside instructions and manipulated the system. I reported him. He's being removed." My breath came in short gasps. It wasn't only my family betraying me, it was an entire network of collusion. Still, I felt relief. Someone was finally unlocking doors that had been sealed against me. Marisol touched my arm gently. "You're not alone in this fight. There are people here who believe in justice." I glanced at the small crucifix hanging from her necklace and whispered, "May God repay you for this courage." Dear reader, if you've ever received unexpected help at just the right moment, write "God sends help" in the comments. Together we'll strengthen the certainty that we never walk without support. Before I could thank her again, my phone buzzed. It was a voice message from Brianna. I pressed play with trembling hands. Her voice came out sweet, but every word dripped poison. "Miriam, think carefully. If you keep this up, you'll lose the grandchildren." The ground seemed to vanish beneath my feet. After Brianna's audio, I spent hours holding the phone, unable to listen again. The words echoed like a threat, and fear haunted the house like a heavy shadow. I tried to pray, but my mind wandered into scenes of loss. Lily and James's laughter silenced, their little arms barred from embracing me. When night fell, the loneliness screamed. Then I heard footsteps on the sidewalk. I pulled back the curtain nervously, but what I saw wasn't threat, it was miracle. Ruthie, joined by a group of women from the church, was walking toward me carrying thermoses, blankets, and a basket full of bread. They settled right there, in front of my house, like silent sentinels. Some began singing hymns softly, others poured tea into paper cups. The night air, which had chilled my bones, filled instead with human warmth. I stepped out onto the porch, tears I couldn't hold back running down my face. Ruthie raised her hand and said, "If they try to isolate you, we will be your wall." I sat on the steps, and one woman draped a blanket over my shoulders. Another clasped my hands and began to pray softly, asking God for courage and protection. The sound wasn't loud, but it was deep, like an underground current of love. I closed my eyes and breathed in that care. I realized that for so long, I had believed I was alone because I looked only at those who hurt me. I had forgotten to see those who sustained me. And there, between hot tea and joined hands, I understood. I was never alone, I just hadn't noticed. Dear reader, if you've ever been lifted up by friends when you thought you had no one, write "Sisterhood Saves" in the comments. Your words may be the reminder another woman needs today. The hours passed, but the vigil held. Their songs mingled with the wind, and fear retreated with each voice lifted. I, who had so often set tables for others, was now receiving back the care I had always offered. I fell asleep on the sofa with the window open, their voices like a lullaby, and when the sun rose, I saw some of them still standing, holding out steaming cups of coffee for me. But before I could thank them, an urgent notification appeared on my phone. A summons for a court hearing, scheduled for the next morning. The embrace I received that night gave me strength. But what awaited me now would demand every ounce of courage I had left. The courthouse loomed before me like a cold fortress. The stone columns reflected the gray light of a rainy morning, and each step I took across the marble floor echoed louder than my heartbeat. Camille walked at my side, folders clutched tight in her arms. Officer Martinez accompanied us, her posture straight, as if she were lending me her strength. I felt small, but not invisible. The courtroom was packed. I recognized faces from church, neighbors, onlookers. In the front row, Daniel kept his head down. Brianna, immaculate in a pale dress, held his hand like an actress in a poorly rehearsed play. Pastor Glenn sat beside them, Bible in hand, grave expression. But when our eyes met, I saw more than devotion. I saw nerves. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a piercing gaze, called for silence. Camille was the first to speak. Her steady voice filled the room. "Your Honor, we are facing a clear case of financial abuse against an elderly woman, backed by indisputable evidence. She opened her folder and handed documents to the expert. A screen lit up, and the footage recorded by Deacon Earl appeared. The room held its breath. Brianna's voice rang clear. "We need her to sign quickly." Then Elliot's reply, "Without her signature, we'll have a problem." A murmur rippled through the benches. The judge raised her hand for silence, and Camille pressed on. "In addition to the video, we present forensic analysis proving Mrs. Carter's signature on the power of attorney was forged. The handwriting report shows blatant inconsistencies, shaky strokes, mismatched slant, crude falsification. I saw Daniel shrink as if the words weighed down on him. Brianna kept her chin high, but her hands trembled in her lap. Then Pastor Glenn was called. He stepped up to the stand hesitantly, clutching the Bible to his chest. "I only signed as a moral witness," he said, his voice coated in false piety. "I wanted to ensure the family stayed united to prevent conflict. My intention was to protect." Camille cut him off. "Protect, Pastor? Or legitimize a crime? Your signature has no legal standing, but it gave a false document the appearance of holiness. You know the weight your name carries in this community." The pastor stammered, trying to defend himself. I trusted what I was told. I thought it was for her good." The words rang hollow, powerless to undo the damage. Dear reader, if you've ever seen someone use the cloak of faith to cover a lie, write "Truth is my light" in the comments. Let us remember that no religious mask can hide God's justice. Camille concluded with the firmness of someone who knows the ground beneath her feet. This is not just a matter of documents, it's a matter of dignity. Mrs. Carter cannot be treated as incapable, as if her life fits into a forged signature. Her story, her faith, her home, all of it was threatened. But today, truth has a voice. The courtroom went silent. The judge drew a long breath, consulted the papers, then tapped the gavel lightly. "This court will review all evidence presented. I ask for complete silence until the decision is announced. The verdict will be read tomorrow at 9 a.m. My heart clenched. I longed for an immediate answer, instant relief. But I left knowing that, before the sun rose again, my life was still hanging by a thread of uncertainty. And as I turned back, I saw Brianna looking at me with a cold smile, as if she still held one last card up her sleeve. The morning broke without flourish, a quiet gray through the courthouse windows. I sat on the wooden bench with my hands clasped, while Camille arranged her papers one last time. The judge entered. The room rose, and for a moment all I could hear was my own heart. "In the name of this court," she began, "I declare the power of attorney granted to Brianna Lowe Carter null and void, due to signature defects confirmed by handwriting analysis and evidence of coercion. I order the permanent freeze of any mortgage operation involving Mrs. Miriam Carter's property until the full investigation is concluded. Furthermore, I order the opening of a criminal inquiry against Mr. Elliot Price and the internal bank employee identified in this hearing." The words came like firm waves striking the shore. I let them wash over me. Null, permanent freeze, criminal investigation. It wasn't vengeance, it was order. It was the world finding its ground again. The judge continued, her voice plain. "I also recommend family mediation with psychological support to re-establish safe boundaries between the parties. This case is not only legal, it is human." She lowered the gavel. The crack of wood sounded, and an ancient peace, perhaps inherited from the women who came before me, wrapped around me like a shawl. I was tired, but whole. In the hallway, the noise resumed, hurried steps, whispers, phones buzzing. That was when I saw Daniel leaning against the wall, his eyes red like a lost boy. He tried to say my name, but no sound came. He wept silently. My pain reached for him, longing to embrace and to distance at the same time. I touched his shoulder. "Son, I love you. But what's mine is no longer your burden nor your shortcut. We'll go to mediation. I'll be there, as your mother, not your wallet." He nodded, crumbling inside. Brianna swept past quickly, her face pale, avoiding my gaze like someone crossing a shattered mirror. Officer Martinez took notes. Camille hugged me wordlessly. I breathed. The courthouse doors shut behind us, and the morning air felt lighter. The Sea of Tybee, though far away, sounded inside me. My voice, once stolen, had found its home again in my chest, and still, as I turned toward the end of the hallway, I realized the story wasn't over. Someone was waiting by the water fountain, holding a brown envelope, as if guarding one last shadow. And I felt the ground tremble again. The courthouse corridor faded behind me, but the weight of Daniel's tears stayed. For days, I avoided meeting him, not out of lack of love, but because I knew any rushed conversation would end in shouting or in armed silence. I waited for the dust to settle, waited for my heart to steady. Until one afternoon, the phone rang. His tired voice asked, "Can we talk? Just the two of us, Mom?" We met on the porch of the Charleston house, where the rose bushes still bloomed even without my daily care. The air was warm, and the birdsong seemed to insist that life moves on, even when the heart still hesitates. Daniel arrived worn down, shoulders slumped, beard unkempt, the look of someone carrying more debts in his soul than in his pocket. He sat slowly, avoiding my eyes. I poured coffee into 2 plain mugs, as I had so many times before. The gesture that once meant comfort now marked neutral ground for our conversation. He began, "Mom, I messed up. I messed up badly, but I'm not a monster. I just didn't know what else to do." I looked at him, breathing deep. My instinct was to embrace him, to dissolve his pain into my chest. But I knew if I did that without boundaries, we'd fall right back into the cycle. I laid my hand on the table and said, "Son, I never stopped loving you. But love without boundaries becomes a chain, not an embrace." He lifted his teary eyes. "So, you're cutting me out of your life." I shook my head. "No, I'm putting in place what I should have long ago. Boundaries. You'll be able to see the children, but in supervised visits. And as for money, that subject is closed. I'll give you presents, not checks." The silence stretched. He seemed to chew each word like swallowing bitter medicine. "You think I can't change?" His voice cracked. I reached out and touched his hand. "I believe you can. But that change has to be born in you, not from my pocket. I carried the world on my back, Daniel, and nearly lost my life. Now it's your turn to learn how to walk." A tear rolled down his face. In that moment, I didn't see a man full of flaws, but the boy who once ran laughing through the Tybee house, the boy who asked me to steady his bike until he found balance. This time, it was life he had to pedal on his own. "I don't know if I can, Mom," he admitted. I squeezed his hand. "Yes, you can, because my love has grown up." The words carried centuries of women before me, mothers who had learned to love without erasing themselves. Love that doesn't coddle, but holds a steady gaze. Love that doesn't fund debts, but prays for deliverance. Dear reader, if you too have had to turn your love into boundaries, write "Grown-up Love Sets Free" in the comments. Your words may help another mother realize that saying no can also be a prayer. Daniel cried in silence, his shoulders shaking. I stayed right there, without rushing to fix, without running to rescue. The wind carried the scent of roses, and I felt God breathing over us the beginning of something new, fragile but real. When he rose to leave, he hesitated at the door. "Will you still let me come into your house?" I smiled, sad but firm. "Whenever you come with respect, the door will be open, but never again to steal my peace." He nodded slowly and left, his footsteps heavy, yet leaving behind the lightness of a mother who had finally learned to love without losing herself. And that night, as I lay down, I realized the silence of the house was no longer emptiness. It was space. Space for me, for my prayers, for a future just beginning to bloom. But I didn't know that. While I slept, the women of the community were already preparing something that would change not only my life, but the lives of many others. Returning to Tybee Island was like reclaiming a part of myself left buried in the sand. The house was tired, walls stained with damp, porch weakened by time and recent neglect. But when I stepped in with a group of church women volunteers, those who had stood by me when the pulpit trembled, I felt that it wasn't just wood being restored. It was my very story. They arrived with tools, brooms, paint cans, and above all, a determination that can't be bought in any store. Ruthie was the first to pick up a paint roller. If your house is reborn, Miriam, our faith is reborn too. Their laughter mingled with the fresh scent of paint and the sound of waves crashing. I watched dignity rise wall by wall, like a temple rebuilt. As we spent days restoring each room, a conviction grew in me. What I had lived through couldn't end as a personal victory alone. My pain had to become a bridge. And so the Golden Dignity Fund was born, a simple yet powerful initiative to guide elderly women against family, banking, and spiritual scams. We used the front room of my house as our first space. The announcement of the first workshop spread quickly. We expected 10 women. 50 came. The chairs weren't enough. We improvised benches on the porch, and some stood without complaint. Every face carried the marks of silenced stories, pensions diverted, signatures forged, promises made in the name of love that turned hollow. I looked out at that sea of women and felt tears rise. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, but I know the weight of having dignity torn away and the value of getting it back. Here, we will learn together to protect what is ours, not only our homes and our accounts, but our voice, our worth." With every word, I saw heads nodding, eyes welling, hands lifting in silent prayer. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a collective declaration, never alone again. Meanwhile, rumors ran through town. They said Pastor Glenn had stepped down from the pulpit, claiming sabbatical rest. Rest or flight, it didn't matter. The truth was that his absence opened space for the community to look more honestly at its own wounds. Dear reader, if you believe pain can be rebuilt into hope, write, "My dignity is living work" in the comments. Your words can be the foundation another woman needs to rise today. That day, when the workshop ended, I walked out to the porch. Outside, a line stretched down the sidewalk. Women who hadn't gotten a seat, but hadn't given up waiting. Some with canes, others with grandchildren by their side, all standing strong. And it was seeing that line that I understood. My struggle was no longer just mine. What had begun as the defense of my house had become a movement. But I didn't yet know that, at the final meeting, someone would appear in that line with a revelation capable of changing everything once again. The Tybee sun reflected off the freshly painted windows, lighting every corner of the porch as if the house itself were smiling. That Saturday, Lily and James came running, carrying little basil seedlings in their hands. The fresh scent of the herb mingled with the sea breeze, creating a perfume that felt like a blessing on the air. I knelt beside them, my hands in the damp soil, and together we dug small holes in the garden. The children's laughter broke the silence that had once been so heavy. Each seedling was more than seasoning. It was a symbol of rebirth, new roots settling into the same ground where I had almost lost everything. "Grandma, this is our little spot, right?" Lily asked, her eyes bright. "Yes, sweetheart. Here, love grows, faith grows." As I smoothed the soil with my fingers, I felt the presence of James, my husband, as if watching and smiling from somewhere beyond the horizon. And there, with my grandchildren's hands dirty from the earth, I realized the most valuable inheritance wasn't the house itself, but the lesson that dignity must never be negotiated. Later, when I walked back into the living room, I found an envelope on the table. I recognized Daniel's handwriting before I even opened it. His voice rose inside me as I read, "Mom, I can't erase what I did, but I'm trying to begin again. I sought help to deal with my debts and my life. I don't write asking for anything, only to say that one day I hope to be worthy of your respect again." The tears came, not from pain, but from hope. I tucked the letter inside my mother's Bible, between the worn pages that had sustained me so many times. Dear reader, if this story touched your heart, write "Dignity is my root" in the comments. Together, we affirm that no woman should walk without respect, without boundaries, without faith. That night, I sat on the porch with Ruthie and the other volunteers. The sea pounded in rhythm, as if keeping time with a new life. I breathed deeply, letting the breeze carry away every scar and return to heaven the pain that no longer belonged to me. And when I closed my eyes, I heard my own soul whisper, I didn't just reclaim a house, I reclaimed my name. Dear friends, if this story touched your heart as it touched mine, share in the comments. What would you have done in her place? Your words may be the comfort another woman needs to hear today. Together we are stronger. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you are watching from. I love knowing our community is spread all over the world. Every day there's a new story here, because every woman deserves to feel valued and never alone. With love and